Thank you so much to everyone who's coming tonight. My name is Catherine Forster. I'm the Canadian Outreach Officer for Earth Day Canada. This is the second of a series of 5 EcoHack-a-City events that will be hosted across Canada in 2021. These events are designed to assist communities with developing creative solutions to local environmental challenges. Please visit the Earth Day Canada website for more information. It's my pleasure today to introduce our moderator for this event. Nick Hebb, Program Director, SMARTNetAlliance. Nick is an experienced and passionate change maker who has been working for the past several years with nonprofit and community-based organizations to help them deliver dynamic events and campaigns around the country. His passion for renewable energy and all things green comes from a deeply rooted love of nature and the environment gained at youth. Nick has been the Program Director for Green Energy Doors Open, one of the country's largest renewable energy public literacy campaigns. Nick is excited about the future of sustainable energy and a decentralized energy system. He looks forward to diving headfirst into many of Ottawa's sustainable initiatives and is currently working with SMARTNetAlliance to create a thriving ecosystem of actively engaged members helping to advance Canada's sustainable economy. Welcome, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Great to be along for this amazing webinar. Really important topic as we look at creating a sustainable future. We know that electric vehicles are going to be a huge part of it. So tonight we're going to hear from 3 amazing panelists, and we're going to dive deep into some of those issues. So before we get going, I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin First Nations here in Ottawa. For anybody not joining us in Ottawa, I invite you to add your own acknowledgement in chat. And so for those of you who don't know me, as Catherine said, I work at SMARTNetAlliance. The Alliance is a group of businesses and organizations who collaborate on projects and initiatives to accelerate Canada's transition to a sustainable economy. So for more information, you can visit our website, and I'll add some links into chat. And we also have our virtual Green Drinks event that happens monthly. And our next one is actually next Thursday. We'll be talking about solar energy. So for those of you who are interested in that, I will add a link later on in chat where you can join in. So thanks again for joining us. Before I introduce the speakers, I want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So this is a Zoom webinar, which means that you won't have any video or audio options, but you can participate in a couple different ways. So one of the ways is the chat function. Feel free to share your thoughts and comments. If you've got any other sustainable events, please do share them in there as well. And the other thing is the Q&A function. So please put your questions here so that we can assure we can get to as many questions as possible. These can be in French or English, and we encourage the audience to use both. Don't forget to upvote the questions that you like so we can sort of see the ones rise to the top. And we are pleased to offer this event as a bilingual event with simultaneous translation. To use this feature, there's a button at the bottom of the screen, and you can either choose French or English. So let's get rolling. Here's a quick review of the schedule. We're going to have 3 panelists. They've got 15 minutes each, so they're going to roll through some presentations. Then we're going to have a quick discussion amongst the panelists, and then we'll open it up for a bit of Q&A as well. So make sure you add your questions in the Q&A section and upvote the ones that you're interested to hear more of. So before we get into the presentations, I would like to welcome Richard Lennon. He's Regional Manager, Metro East, West, and Atlantic, TD Friends of the Environment and Foundation. Come on in, Richard, for a few words.
Thank you so much. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Lennon, Regional Manager with TD Friends of the Environment Foundation at TD Bank Group. I'm thrilled to be with you here this evening, and I'm proud of our continued support of Earth Day Canada for more than 25 years. A special thank you to Earth Day Canada for organizing today's EcoHack-a-City event and the 3 other regional events that are set to take place in the coming weeks. I think this is such a great forum to connect with each other from afar and gather over a shared passion for environmental sustainability and stewardship. The EcoHack-a-City notion brings together creativity, strategic thinking, and collaboration from various stakeholders that can help address for some of the most pressing issues facing Canadian cities. It's also an opportunity to innovate together on new ways we can help create positive change for the environment and open doors towards a greener future in Canada. In fact, helping open doors for a more inclusive and sustainable tomorrow is at the heart of the TD Ready commitment, which is our corporate citizenship strategy and a focus for the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation. We truly believe we have an obligation to future generations to take care of our planet, and it starts with our actions today. That's why we're building off our environmental leadership over the last several decades, like being the first North American-based bank to become carbon neutral, towards new actions that will help address global issues like climate change. Between this evening's public discussion forum and next month's collaborative training program, I can't wait to hear the wonderful talking points and action plans that are co-created, and I look forward to seeing them implemented in the future. Thank you so much and enjoy the panel.
Thanks so much, Richard. Thanks for all the work you're doing there, yourself and your team there at TD. Really appreciate that. So next up, we have Scott Moffatt, who's from the City of Ottawa, and he's the chair of the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management. Scott, come on in for a few words.
Hey, thanks so much, and good evening. And welcome to this panel discussion on what programs and policies are in place to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. Ottawa is incredibly pleased to join Moncton, Laval, North Vancouver, and Calgary as part of the EcoHack-a-City initiative. Last year, the Council unanimously approved targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Ottawa to zero by 2050, corporate emissions by 2040 to zero. Electrifying all personal vehicles represents the single largest emission reduction action that Ottawa can take to achieving its zero emission future. Our climate change master plan recognizes that we can't do this alone, but the good news is we don't have to. Electric vehicles are becoming more affordable, more versatile, and more available. Automakers are committing to only selling electric vehicles by 2030 or sooner. The total cost of ownership for electric vehicles is now about even with traditional vehicles and will continue to become more affordable in the years to come. Additional fast charging stations are also coming online across Canada, across the United States. In addition, Ontario's low carbon grid provides an opportunity to save around 4 tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year for the average driver. Charging stations are being installed across the city, starting with a few in the East End, Blackburn Arena and Bob McCorry Recreation Complex, as well as in the right-of-way along streets in the downtown area. The city will monitor the usage to better understand where the demand is greatest and explore the feasibility of expanding charging options in the future. Within the City of Ottawa, Mitchell House, who's here today with us, is the individual responsible for bringing forward a strategy to support the adoption of electric vehicles and is available to answer any questions related to electric vehicles at the municipal level. So sit back, relax, enjoy this presentation, and make sure to subscribe to the City of Ottawa Climate Change newsletter to keep updated and learn about the other events related to electric vehicles across the City of Ottawa. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate the work that you're doing there at the city, and yeah, encourage everybody to get on that climate change newsletter and keep supporting events like this. So next up, I want to welcome Mitchell House, and you heard Scott say this is the City of Ottawa's newest project manager, and he's going to be focusing on the electric vehicle strategy. So welcome in, Mitchell.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Scott, for the introduction as well. Like Nick was saying, I'm one of the newer members of the team here, so I've only been in the role for about 2 months. But in that time, I've gotten to kind of understand what needs to be done at the city level in order to move forward on the electrification of vehicles. So in my role here, I'm not only looking to support the personal electric vehicle strategy as well as the commercial electric vehicle strategy that we've committed to as part of the energy evolution as a whole. But also any technical questions that come up in regards to the electrification of the city suite and questions that come forward from the members of the public who have curious questions about electric vehicles as well. So I'm looking to share my email with you guys in the chat at some point going forward in the presentation here. And if you do have any other questions, though, you can also reach me at my city email, and that's probably the easiest way to get in touch. So, and again, looking forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists here, and also keen to hear what their experience has been and what we can do going forward. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mitchell. Congratulations on your role. And I know the direction of EVs is in good hands and moving forward in Ottawa. So let's get rolling on our presentations. Let's bring in Raymond Leury, who's president over at the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. Raymond is retired from an IT career working on technology strategy for over 25 years with both private and public sector clients. The last 18 years he spent working with Microsoft, culminating in the position of principal consultant. Raymond has always been interested in environmental issues. That led him to purchase an EV 8 years ago and get involved with EV owners groups, which he now occupies the position of president of the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. He has attended Al Gore's Climate Reality Project leadership, which reignited his passion for the environment. Raymond splits his time between advocating for EVs, talking climate change, volunteering with the Red Cross, and most recently, helping with COVID-19 efforts. So thanks so much for all the work you're doing, Raymond. Let's bring you in for your presentation and talk about EVs.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Can you see my screen? Oops, sorry. Can you see it now?
There you go. You're all good to go. Thanks, Raymond.
Great. So as Nick said, my name is Raymond Leury, and I'm president of the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. And what we'll do, we'll start by talking a bit about the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa and who we are. So we've been around since 1983, so almost 40 years now. And currently, what we're doing is we're working on trying to accelerate the electrification of the transportation system. So today I'll talk mostly about personal vehicles, but we've worked on other things like OC Transpo electric buses, for example, which we're very happy to see that we'll have a few of them on the roads very soon. So what we're trying to do is to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, really to reduce greenhouse gases. As Councillor Moffatt has said, EVs, using an EV instead of a gas vehicle will save somewhere around 4 tons of greenhouse gases per year per vehicle. Right. So if you're interested to seeing what we have to say and joining our meetings, we meet every last Monday of the month at 7:30, and our website efco.ca has got information about that. So you've probably heard this before. You've heard Wayne Gretzky say something to the effect that I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck has been. Right, and that's explaining his success in hockey. So to use that analogy, what I'd like to do is talk about where the puck is right now. So if we look at the Canadian EV market, you can see these are numbers from StatsCan, and it's a very interesting visualization tool that they have there. So the red bar here is a battery electric vehicle, BEV, and the purple here is plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, okay, PHEVs. So you can see a gradual increase in the numbers over the years. 2020 was a bit exceptional. The market for vehicles in Canada dropped by about 20%, but EVs still grew a bit. So it's a bit of an anomaly because of COVID. One thing to note here, there's a lot of interesting data on the screen, but one thing to note is that pickup trucks are not represented because there are no pickup trucks in market yet. There will be soon. And same with vans. There's only one model of van that's a PHEV on the market currently in Canada today. All of that being said, the market share for last year was up to 3.5%. That doesn't seem like a super large amount, but let's see other stats as we go through the presentation. So in Europe, meanwhile, and I won't explain why the dynamic is different in Europe, but Europe saw an absolute explosion of sales of EVs last year. Norway, which has been the leader for forever, I think, in terms of adoption, they're now at over 70% of the new vehicles sold there that are plug-in vehicles. And you can see that many countries doubled or tripled their market share last year. Notice the United Kingdom here is a laggard, so we were at about the same place as them. They've skipped ahead of us last year with that 8.8%. But bottom line is they're very similar to us in terms of deployment of existing vehicles. If we look at the market from a global perspective, so we see here a very steep growing curve. So the black curve is the percentage. The bars are the actual numbers. So you see that things slowed down a bit in 2019. That's because China did something with their subsidies, but you see a large growth in European sales here. And you see that the growth of the market is getting into exponential territory. Okay, so if you've ever, before we get to that, actually, one of the things that's driving the sales of EVs is a drop in cost. So Councillor Moffatt mentioned that already, and that's driven largely by the fact that the batteries for the electric vehicles have dropped in price by 87% between 2010 and 2020. And we expect them to keep on dropping at a rate of about 20% per year for the foreseeable future. So they're getting cheaper and cheaper over time. right? So that's where we are right now, but where is the puck going, right? So it's pretty hard to have a crystal ball and determine, what is the future going to look like. But if you look at some of the research on technology adoption in particular, you'll know that there's something called the technology adoption S-curve. It's got other names too, but this example here is for color TVs in the US. And the point here is that as when the sales start going exponential at the bottom here, at some point they increase dramatically and then they level off. So you see an S shape here, and that generally corresponds to a curve, a price curve that's going down. So we're seeing right now the price curve for EVs going down, and we're seeing the adoption going up. Okay, so this is the one for color TVs. If you look at other adoption curves over the years, and there's been studies that show that technology adoption has been happening this way for millennia. The copper age or bronze age and all that, those technologies were adopted in a similar fashion back then. Now you see some anomalies here. Around here, there was something called the Great Depression and the Second World War that affected adoption rates. And here with airlines, you see that the energy crisis of the 70s actually slowed down the adoption of air travel. But generally speaking, we're seeing adoption curves getting steeper and steeper as we move towards today. Okay, so and every technology that's ever been out there has been adopted using an S-curve, and that's just the way that things work. So if you remember what I showed you before, I showed you this graph before, and you're seeing that the market share is going up at an exponential rate here. Well, what does that mean for EVs? It means that we're somewhere around here on this S-curve. Okay, so you could argue that the position in different countries are in slightly different positions for different reasons, which I won't go into. But bottom line, from a global perspective, we're somewhere around here. So we're going to see a rapid adoption of EVs. Okay, and it's not just me saying that. So it's been known for a while, this curve you may have seen before, that again, as Councillor Moffatt said earlier, economists actually are saying that the price of an EV, a low-priced EV, so mainstream car, will be about the same as an EV sometime around 2023. Okay, so with some vehicles, that is already the case. Other vehicles, especially the ones at the lower price range, it's taking a bit longer because of the price of the batteries. But bottom line is we're expecting electric cars to be less expensive than gas cars in near future, and other costs for cars. So if you look at the cost of the fuel, so the electricity, it's about 80% less than the cost of gas, and maintenance is a lot less on EVs. So the operational costs are much lower. Okay, so if the purchase price is lower and the operational costs are lower, it's going to become a no-brainer to switch an electric vehicle. Now, if you look at other projections that are out there, so Norway is actually mandating that 100% of new car sales be EVs by 2025. That's only 4 years away. Okay, so they're already above 70%, so they're going to be able to do that no problem. We see other countries and some states have a mandate for 100% new sales by 2030. That's only 9 years away. Okay, and these are, in some cases, countries. The UK, I showed earlier, is similar to us in terms of market share. If you look at what the International Energy Agency came up with in the report a couple of weeks ago, so they have a net zero by 2050 report that shows the pathways to get to net zero by 2050. What they're saying is that we need to be building and selling only EVs by 2035. Okay, and they're saying that this is quite possible. They don't see any reason why we cannot get there. Okay, Ford. So again, Councillor Moffatt mentioned something to this effect. Ford, they said that 40% of their vehicles will be pure electric by 2030. Okay, Ford is a fairly conservative company, so for them to say something like that, it probably likely means that there's going to be more than that. GM are planning to exclusively offer electric vehicles by 2035. And with Cadillac, that'll be in 2030. Bloomberg NEF, so Bloomberg New Energy Finance, are a very reputable organization that does forecasting of a bunch of things. They're saying that we're going to have about 500 EV models globally by 2022. So 500 different models of EVs available globally. Currently, there's probably somewhere around 200 models that are sold throughout the world. So we're seeing a lot more availability, and that's allowing people to choose EVs when they want to. There's another gentleman called Sandy Monroe, and I'll show on the next page here. He did a presentation a little while ago, and this is something he normally shares only with his own customers. But what he's saying is in 2028, and you could look him up on, he's got some interesting videos on YouTube. You could look him up, and what he's saying is by 2028, globally, 70% of vehicles will be EVs, and only 5% will be traditional ICE vehicles. Okay, so internal combustion without any hybrid capability. So that's in line with the projections we've been doing at EFCO. We've been looking at this for a number of years now, and the projections we've done are actually coming true. We're following them as things are happening. We believe we'll be near 100% by 2030. Okay, so all of that said means that, so what does it mean for Ottawa, right? So if you're looking at Ottawa, we have somewhere around 600,000 vehicles in Ottawa, probably a bit more, but for argument's sake, let's say 600,000 at some time before 2050. Okay, so I'm saying it's going to take a while for the fleet to convert, because even if we stop selling gas engines, let's say by 2030 or 2035, we're still going to have some on the roads for a while. So, but at some time around around 2050 at the latest, all these vehicles will be electric. So 600,000 vehicles in Ottawa alone will be electric. Okay, so we're projecting that about 250 by 2030. If it's not 2030, it'll certainly be 250 by 2035 at the absolute latest. Okay, so 250,000 EVs on the roads of Ottawa within 10 or so years. So about 60% of those will be able to easily charge at home. Okay, because those are situations like what I have, where I'm at home. I have a two-car garage, and I have two chargers in my garage, no problem. But one car uses one charger, and that's the way we expect most people will function. Okay, but by 2030, that still means that we need some public charging available for about 100,000 cars in Ottawa. Okay, that's a lot of cars that need public charging. So out of the aside from the 60% that have single family homes or garages attached to their homes, the other 40%, it's composed of rentals, condos, and others, which are referred to typically as garage orphans. So people who don't have a garage park on the street or whatever it may be. So there's quite a few vehicles that will be in a situation where we're going to need to provide some charging facilities, right? So if you look at what we have in Ottawa right now, we have about 134 public locations. There's 22 that are fast chargers, and several of these are under construction or service, or they're at dealers, so they're not accessible. But this means that for non-Tesla vehicles, there's about 20 at most chargers available all over Ottawa. Okay, not a very large amount. For level 2 chargers, there's 110 locations. Most of these have only one charger. There's a bunch that have two, and very few have more than 2 chargers. So, and as an example, the City Hall has only one level 2 charger, okay, for the whole of City Hall. So there's a big gap there, right? So what does that mean? So if you look at a picture of it from PlugShare, so if you want to know where charges are, PlugShare is a good website to go to. This is what it looks like for Ottawa. The brownish or orangish are high-speed chargers. The greenish are they're level 2 chargers, they're slower chargers. Okay, that's what it looks like. If you compare it to something like London, yes, London's got a much bigger population. However, they've got about the same penetration rate for EVs as what we have. But you see there's a heck of a lot more fast chargers, and many of these locations have more than one chargers. Most of the ones in Ottawa have one or two chargers at the most. Okay, so London is equipped for a penetration rate of maybe 1%, and you see what it looks like right now. So they need this to be completely covered with charging stations to be able to support the EVs that they're going to see there over the next couple of years. Okay, and of course, Ottawa's in a similar situation. So what can the city do to address this? Well, we need somewhere around 150 private chargers. So these are chargers that would be in people's garages serving one vehicle at a time. And we need somewhere around 10,000 public chargers by 2030. So 10,000, these are fairly rough estimates at this point, but essentially we need chargers for about 100,000 cars. Okay, so I think we need to study this in more details and determine how many should be level 2 chargers and how many should be DCFC chargers. But bottom line is we need lots of chargers, a lot more than what we have right now. In 2050, the number is even bigger. Okay, so what can the city do? Well, one of the things it could do is expedite the process for EV charging stations. So, make it easy for permitting to happen, and perhaps get Hydro Ottawa to waive the fees for electrical changes. In my case, it cost me $900 in inspection fees for the changes I did for my chargers at home. And that's certainly an obstacle to getting chargers deployed, right? Perhaps the installation of chargers should be subsidized. So maybe Ottawa Hydro, since they will make some money selling electricity to these consumers who have electric cars, they could use some of that money to subsidize the installation of the chargers. We should also mandate minimum charges in commercial spaces. This is particularly important for people who don't have charging at home and need to charge at work. So if at work you have charging available, that makes it possible for you to charge, right? So, and I'm going to try, my time is coming up soon. I'm going to try to go a bit faster. So building codes also, we used to have a legislation that was removed by Ford that forced or mandated some charging infrastructure in new housing. We should get back to that. This will become a major equity issue because low-income people would save money by driving electric. So there's used options available. They would save money on operational costs, and we would like them to be able to take advantage of electric vehicles. But you look at areas like Vanier where that would be very difficult, right? One proposal we have is to add charging to the Complete Streets program. Right now, we're spending $50 million to renovate Montreal Road, but as far as I know, there won't be a single charger as part of that program. We should educate the public about the virtues of electric cars and incent people to charge at night so that it makes it a bit easier on a grid. And we need to start planning for locations now. So that's what I had. Back to you, Nick.
Thanks so much, Raymond. That was a great presentation. Nice to see some of the numbers and the stats. And I know we've got a pretty active discussion in chat there. So thanks so much, everybody. And I know a couple of the panelists are also jumping on the Q&A as well. So thanks to them for that. And feel free to add your questions into Q&A, everybody there. So thanks, Raymond. Really appreciate that. And next up, we're going to hear from Sara Ganowski. And she is Specialist Smart Cities Green Energy and Technology Center over at Alectra Utilities, and where she leads a business development and research activities with a focus on distributed energy technologies and electric mobility. As a founding member, Sara brings her experience in managing complex EV projects. She has judged various pitch competitions and mentored climate tech startups throughout her career. With a passion for community energy planning, she currently sits on the board of Our Energy Guelph and has published several studies on the adoption of clean technologies in scientific journals. Sara holds a master's degree in environmental studies, specializing in energy sustainability, and a joint honors bachelor of environmental studies and communications from the University of Waterloo. Come on in, Sara, to get your presentation going. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Nick, for a very warm welcome. And hello, everyone. I'm just going to throw my presentation up here. Fantastic. Everybody see that okay? Great. Okay. So thanks again, Nick. And as Nick mentioned, I'm actually a bit of an anomaly today since I'm currently in my home in Guelph, Ontario, so not near Ottawa, but I'm really excited to bring a utility perspective to this conversation. I currently work at Alectra Utilities out of our Green Energy and Technology Center. So I spent a lot of time thinking about EV adoption and e-mobility and how that might affect our utility and in Ontario and our energy system altogether. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. And what a great time to talk about it with the Environment Day just around the corner. So of course, it wouldn't be an EV presentation if we didn't mention Mr. Musk. So love or hate the man, he has something going here when he says that in order to have clean air in cities, you have to go electric. So today I wanted to take you for a little ride, and that would involve taking a look at 4 mega trends that are disrupting our energy sector, why utilities like Alectra are engaging in the EV revolution, some promising trends, which Raymond's done already a fantastic job showing us, so I'll probably skim through that piece a little bit, and what we at Alectra and the Great Center have learned so far. And I just wanted to throw this picture up because I saw somebody driving with a similar template in the Guelph area, and I had such a laugh because it's such a sentiment to where we are today and where we'll be in the next few years. So for those of you who don't know Alectra, we are actually the second largest municipally owned LDC in North America. So we serve over 1 million customers across the GTA and greater Horseshoe area. We make up 17 communities, and we're actually an amalgamation of 5 different LDCs that came together in 2019. So our business is split into the regulated side, which is the utility, which is responsible for providing electricity to residential and commercial customers. And then we've got our unregulated arm, Alectra Energy Solutions, and they do some cooler stuff over there by providing innovative energy technology solutions like storage, EV charging infrastructure, solar PV, and the like. So before we talk EV, I think it's really important to understand the mega trends that this topic today is driven by in our sector. And I've been studying this since I was a grad student back in 2016, 2017. So this is now following me into my work at Alectra. And what it is our energy sector is affected by these 4 disruptive trends: decarbonization, decentralization, democratization, and digitalization. And these are significantly affecting the way we generate, distribute, use, and think about energy. And they become the fabric of what we do at Alectra. So starting with decarbonization, we recently pledged to be a net zero company by 2050. We're seeing a huge push for distributed energy resources, and we're exploring new business models for storage, EVs. We are also seeing customers asking for more clean energy solutions. They want more control and engagement with their energy. And we're constantly working with data and technology to build that next generation grid. So as much as I want to say this narrative is getting old, it's only accelerating. So at Alectra, we're currently very focused on e-mobility because we do believe that the future is electric, and I pardon the pun, but these 4Ds, as they drive technology innovation in our sector, we do anticipate that DERs, distributed energy resources like EVs, will transform both our relationship with our customers, but also the energy ecosystem as a whole. So why would we engage with this? Simply because we cannot afford not to. Our customers are turning to us. Utilities are actually the second most trusted source of information on EVs, right after Consumer Reports and think tanks. So we see this as an incredible opportunity to truly be that customer ally, that gateway, that one-stop shop to customers' EV journey. Because whether you're a homeowner or a commercial facility owner, at some point in your EV journey, you will have to engage with your utility, and we should be there. So this is the model that we're starting to see in North America. Leading progressive utilities in the States are positioning themselves as that one-stop shop. And this is phenomenal to see, because traditionally EV and e-mobility is not the core business of utilities. So again, a huge sentiment to where we're going. So further to this, EVs will of course become integrated within our energy infrastructure and our broader ecosystem. So this brings opportunity not only for customer engagement, but for of course managing grid impacts, modernizing or deferring infrastructure upgrades, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, achieving efficiencies and savings. So the list goes on, and I don't really need to spend too much time on this because it's a pretty easy case to sell. As e-mobility is here to stay, and utilities should be paying attention. So I won't spend too much on this because we had a great overview from Raymond, but I do want to say, now that digitalization is bringing that decentralization of energy solutions, we will see more EVs on the road. By 2040, half the cars globally will be electric. And as you can see, that growth trend is expected to be exponential for a number of years. So what's driving this? Of course, demand. Prices are going down, incentives are driving this forward. Supply is increasing, automakers are giving more choice to consumers, and of course, ZEV mandates are here. Government support and targets are definitely fueling this transition. So when you look at Canada's targets, which is 30% of all new cars sold in 2030 will be electric, these are aggressive, but they're not unrealistic if we look at the trends here and what Raymond had showed. So looking at Ontario and what this means for Alectra. So currently in Ontario, I think about Q1 of 2021, we had just around 57,000 EVs. And if I was doing this presentation 6-8 months ago, I would have said 46,000. So we are growing by a rate of 28% year over year. And we actually have 1/3 of all EVs, registered EVs in Ontario within our territory. So this is certainly something that we need to pay attention to. Surprise, surprise, the most popular vehicles are Tesla. Over 1/3 of the rebates currently available in Canada have been used by Tesla Model 3 drivers. So that's very interesting to see them continuing on with the market share. But what this means for us, okay, EVs are plugging into the grid, so there's more opportunity for distributed energy solutions because EVs can connect with other assets. There's more opportunity for engagement with our customers who are looking for those new offerings. So this is definitely an opportunity that utilities are watching. So with this, I wanted to share with you a little bit about our response to the uptake of e-mobility and these 4 Ds. But before that, I would like to take a few minutes to talk to you about our GREAT Center. So GREAT stands for Green Energy and Technology. This is our innovation hub, our think tank, our ground zero for innovation. You can think of it as the bridge between research and development. And we have actually 3 strategic areas right now. So we've got our smart cities domain that is almost entirely focused on e-mobility because it's that important. Grid innovation, so looking at larger modernization projects and technologies, and advanced planning, which takes into account data analytics, transactive energy platforms, and more kind of data-driven trends of the future. So I'm very fortunate to work out of our smart cities team and looking at our EV research efforts and are currently looking at our fleet electrification strategy. So under the smart cities team, we have our kind of famous Alectra Drive program. So this is our first foot forward with EVs back in 2015, 2016, when we started designing the projects. What it is an integrated project that tests smart EV solutions, both for home and workplace charging. So these projects go beyond just installing charging stations. They leverage smart connected technology that allows the utility to test EVs as grid responsive resources to deliver both customer and grid friendly solutions. So what this means, our workplace charging pilot launched in 2017, and the goal there was to deliver a turnkey cost mitigating EV charging solution for businesses and their fleets. We wanted to assess how EVs can be used as grid responsive assets, and we leveraged what we call a distributed energy resource management system, which connects EV charging infrastructure with HVAC systems, battery storage, to help building reduce their energy usage and costs. So we have 3 sites for Alectra Drive at Work project, including our very own corporate office, and we're currently testing that smart charging capability with our various partners. Our most recent pilot, Alectra Drive at Home, is our residential EV program. And this project tests different methods that encourage drivers to charge off peak. So similar to what Raymond had suggested, why don't we incentivize or get users to charge overnight where there is less strain and demand on the grid. So we're testing different incentive models for this. And again, we're focusing on network smart chargers. So these chargers do have demand response capabilities, and we are trying to narrow in on the multi-residential sector because that is certainly a niche market that is experiencing barriers and lack of accessible EV charging solutions. So this project, I've been working on this project for about 2 years now, and it's really allowed us to test the residential EV business model for utilities, allow us to advocate utilities' role in managed EV charging, which will be very important since we know that I think it's over 90% of charging now happens in the home. It was 80 last year, but with, of course, the work from home lifestyle, that number is substantially higher. So our residential pilot has been quite a ride because we have seen firsthand what those barriers to EV adoption are. And as keen as we are to move this agenda forward, we can see that there's still a lot of work to be done ahead of us to be able to scale these types of integrated solutions. So the encouraging news is that there is interest, there's motivation. Customers are constantly reaching out to us. They want to participate in programs like this. They've told us they're registering for Alectra Drive at Home for environmental reasons. They are an EV driver because they want to save on fuel costs, but there are still barriers. They feel that there are not enough incentives out there to get them to either switch or continue to drive electric. And they're still very much concerned about a lack of charging infrastructure and availability. So what we have seen out of this program, though, is some interesting behavioral insights. So most EV drivers are already charging off peak, and it's not too much of a surprise since we've kind of groomed our Ontario residents to follow the time of use schedule, and with COVID, it makes sense, of course, but this is a good learning for us because it means that there's an opportunity here for a very seamless transition for EV adoption, that utilities can work with their customers to make sure that as more EVs plug into the grid, we are managing that, and it does not come at the cost of power reliability. So very, very insightful in and of itself. However, in order to achieve mass adoption, we also have seen that utilities still really need regulatory clarity and support and market intervention to even pilot these types of programs. They're very expensive. And we've been lucky enough to leverage government funding, but it's just clear to see that we still need that intervention in order to make this a reality. So we actually had to be pretty creative with some of the ways that we simulated, these future business models around residential charging, because current regulations just prohibited us to doing certain things like charging per kilowatt hour. We had to really collaborate with our regulators to pilot alternative usage rates. So all of these considerations, right, before we can think, okay, this is a commercial model. Finally, the multi-res EV market is certainly niche. You don't really think there's a lot of drivers in condos because where are they going to charge? But we are seeing that increase. We're getting a lot of buildings reaching out to us saying, we've got residents with EVs. What can we do for them? How do we pay for this? What can we offer? So the demand is there, and that has opened up many opportunities for new market players to come in and offer, turnkey EV charging, load management solutions. Where you see these startups partnering with utilities like us because they have identified that barrier and that need in the market. And 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't have seen this. And finally, one of the greatest barriers again is to address that perceived lack of accessible charging infrastructure. So many people are still reluctant to buy an EV because there's simply not enough stations for them to fuel up as they would with their gas car, right? And this is of course changing with new government mandates, but on the commercial front, through our Alectra Energy Solutions company, we've been able to again leverage government funding to deploy public charging solutions at our various municipalities across pockets of high demand in our service territory. So to sum this all up, I wanted to provide some great lessons learned. And yes, we overused this pun way too much. That's okay. So number one is that we can't do it alone. As I mentioned, EVs, e-mobility, this is not utility core business. It is becoming so, but we are still very much reliant on collaboration. Each of our pilot projects has anywhere of 10 and up different partners and vendors involved, different solution providers. So we're constantly working with different players in the market to make things happen. Number two, as I mentioned, is technology is vastly outpacing our regulatory and political frameworks. There's opportunity here for advocacy and adaptation in order to turn these innovative ideas into commercial realities. Three is that hardware is important, but it is a software game. Software is becoming the secret sauce in terms of EV charging solutions, especially if you're connecting different technologies to achieve load management or demand response use cases. We definitely work with a lot of software providers. Four is that solutions need to be customer centric, of course. Through our pilots, we're able to get customer feedback, work with them to develop, what a future managed charging business model might look like. So we've definitely taken that on with all of our project development. And finally, a bit of a chicken and egg debate, but we say build it and they will come. And there's still an even greater debate as to who is responsible for building it. But we do think that if you develop the infrastructure, if you develop the ecosystem, you will take down some of those adoption barriers, if not all of them. So with that, I'll leave it there. And thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. Really appreciate the work you're doing there with Alectra and some important stats. And we'll circle back with you for a panel discussion in the next segment there. So thanks again. Next up, I want to welcome Maggie Baynham, and she is sorry, let me get my notes back here. She is the Senior Sustainability Planner with the District of Saanich, where she leads the development of policy and programs to help the district achieve its climate action goals. She attended the School of Community and Regional Planning at UBC and started her career with the City of Surrey before relocating to the beautiful Victoria. Since she started with the district in 2017, Maggie has worked on the development of their award-winning climate plan and led the implementation of many of its actions. Much of Maggie's work is focused on supporting electric mobility, and she looks forward to sharing strategies of what has been learned with others. And she's also an e-bike driver, which we just found out. So come on in, Maggie, to start your presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's an e-bike with some room on the back for the kids. So happy to be here. Thanks so much. And for the great presentations we've heard so far as well. I'm going to jump right into it in the interest of time. Oh, my screen's not advancing. There we go. Just a little bit of a lag. So for those unfamiliar with the District of Saanich, we're a mid-sized municipality, about 114,000 folks. And we're on the west coast, nestled in next to the city of Victoria on southern Vancouver Island. We're an interesting mix of urban, rural, and suburban land uses. Our community-wide carbon footprint is over 500,000 tons. So why is it important for local governments to be playing an active role in enabling EVs? And first and foremost, transportation is one of the largest contributors to GHG emissions at the local level. For Saanich, that proportion is 58% of our community-wide emissions. But there's also a number of, I think, unique roles that local governments play in this space. So everything from regulating new construction to support EV-ready building requirements, leveraging municipally owned lands to install EV charging, demonstrating leadership with corporate fleet and sustainable commuting options for employees, working collaboratively with other stakeholders. We've heard about some of those stakeholders and levels of government to influence and support EV adoption, particularly in those areas where we don't have direct control. And of course, being responsive to the needs that are specific to every community, really engaging with residents, businesses, other community members at that local level. So Saanich has been actively working on climate action for well over a decade now, but early last year, Council adopted our renewed climate plan that I'd say stepped up the level of ambition and accountability. So our plan has targets to cut emissions by 50% by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050, as well as transition to 100% renewable energy by 2050 and prepare for a changing climate. And within the plan, we also have targets for our corporate emissions, so that will be really leading the community in this way. So those targets are ahead of what the community-wide reductions would see us achieve. So as part of the plan, we forecast the business as usual projection based on current policies and modeled the pathway we need to get to our targets. And vehicle electrification, much like Ottawa, we heard at the beginning of this session, the vehicle electrification is the single largest impact area in terms of GHG reductions in our community. It's not the silver bullet, it's not the only thing that we need to do, but it is certainly absolutely crucial and can get us 19% of the way to our 2050 target and net zero if implemented effectively. So to get there, we'll need 36% of our personal vehicles to be electrified by 2030. So that's where we're headed. With high stakes on vehicle electrification, we set about creating a more detailed strategy document to guide our actions, particularly in kind of the shorter term, the next few years. And we created an electric mobility strategy that was adopted by Council just this past November. The strategy has 38 actions in 5 focus areas, which you can see here on the screen. I won't get into the details of it within this presentation, but did want to highlight that we felt it was really important to include e-bikes in the scope of the strategy, given the many community co-benefits that come along with active transportation. And because e-bikes have a really promising potential to displace car trips in our region. The average e-bike trip and the average car trip are both 6 kilometers here, not very far. So we'd actually started making progress on the strategy before it was approved by Council. So we have a fair bit to show for it already. The focus of my presentation today will be on the EV-ready requirements for new construction and how we're supporting EV-ready retrofits in multifamily buildings, so the first 2 bullets. But we're also working on that public charging network. We are nearly complete installing 20 new level 2 EV stations at Saanich facilities, and that's adding to the 12 we already had. We just introduced a new $1 per hour user fee, which is meant to improve turnover and the kind of efficient use of the stations and reduce free ridership on them. We have been and will continue to roll out educational initiatives, a really important piece of it, especially we're finding with strata owners. We've completed conversion to 100% electric for our passenger car fleet, and now we're turning our attention to those medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles and charging infrastructure, and also workplace charging for our employees. So what do we see as the pinch points in this space? Supply has, of course, been an issue, and to address this, the province of BC has brought in a zero emission vehicle mandate that legislates the percentage of zero emission vehicles sold within the province, with some interim requirements, and then bringing us up to 100% by 2040. And then, of course, having limited models in the market until now, we're starting to see more, has certainly limited the kind of market segments that have been able to participate. But I think that issue is really starting to resolve itself, and we'll see those come online now and in the future. Purchase price is, of course, an issue. Our own region, we did a survey and found that that was kind of unsurprisingly the #1 barrier that was listed by non-EV owners. But as battery prices continue to decline, EVs are projected, as was mentioned, to achieve price parity with conventional cars. And we're expecting that by mid-2020s. But after purchase price, the other #2 and #3 barriers that was cited by our residents was access to charging at home, and public charging were the two places. And both of these are spaces where local governments can have a great deal of influence. So how do we address the barrier of access to charging? Well, we install more of it. But where we install charging is really important, and is well illustrated in this pyramid, which you may have seen. It shows that at home is the most important location. It's the most convenient for drivers. It's the most common, most cost-effective. Single family installations generally are fairly straightforward, but multifamily buildings really pose unique challenges related to decision-making, particularly in stratas where there's multiple owners, and legislation through stratas that govern how those decisions can be made, cost, complexity, and in the case of rental units, there's a split incentive that makes it less likely for the owners of those buildings to install the charging. Lack of charging, we've found to have probably the biggest potential in terms of the constraint for large-scale adoption. So a recent analysis was done here in the capital region and showed that at current levels of charging infrastructure and policy, we would only see about 11% of vehicles on the road being electric by 2030. So we know we need to step up the charging scene. So in light of needing our buildings to be future-proofed and high levels of at-home charging, Saanich set our first priority as setting requirements for new construction. And we did this through a zoning bylaw amendment and the creation of a new electric vehicle off-street parking bylaw. So as of September 1st of 2020, we now require that 100% of parking stalls in new residential development are equipped with an energized level 2 outlet. So that is all the electrical infrastructure up to and including the outlet, does not include the charger itself. And that is what we define as EV ready. We also require that a much smaller proportion of stalls, generally in the range of 5%, depending on the use, be energized, and in some cases equipped with the actual stations in commercial, institutional, and industrial land uses. So I wanted to just take a moment here to highlight using EV energy management systems, because it's really what's enabled these policy changes. And I love that both myself and Sara described it as the secret sauce in our slides. So yes, so these are really important tools for bringing down the electrical capacity requirements and therefore the costs for both new construction as well as retrofits. So energy management systems allow multiple EV stations to share a circuit and loads. The stations are smart, they communicate with each other, and loads are managed so they don't exceed the capacity of that circuit. Simplistically, if one charger is plugged in, it would get the full capacity of that circuit, and if a second EV pulls up and plugs in, then they would share that power. And this is illustrated in the diagram on the right-hand side here. The image on the left illustrates a typical installation where one or a few EV chargers are installed, and each is on its own dedicated circuit. So you can imagine that it would eat up the electrical capacity of a building pretty quickly, and could require significant electrical upgrades if you were looking to put in a fair number of EVs, or EV stations, I guess I should say. So this is a case study from AES Engineering of a retrofit in a multifamily building, but its illustration on the cost effectiveness of using EV energy management systems is applicable to both new construction and retrofits. So you can see there's a lot of information on this, but you can see that in this example, installing a dedicated circuits would cost the building $4,200 per stall, and that's not including the station, for a total project cost of over $600,000. Whereas doing a four-way sharing scenario on a 40 amp circuit, which is in Saanich what the maximum amount of sharing is that's allowed, or what we call the performance standard, that brings the cost down to less than $1,000 per stall. And if there's more sharing in the rows underneath, you can see that the cost comes down even further. So just a little bit more context on what went into the policy building for this. EV infrastructure is considered out of scope in the BC Building Code, and so can be regulated by local governments here. So that was clarified a couple of years ago when local governments started to look at this. And we had a costing study, again, but done by AES Engineering, and there's been several since, that showed that it was reasonable cost to have these requirements. And it compared it to, if we don't do this now, what the retrofit cost will be in the future. And it showed what the cost would be compared to kind of doing this typical approach of dedicated circuits versus using energy management systems. There was a precedent set. Richmond here in the Lower Mainland was the first to move forward, and then Saanich and many other municipalities soon followed suit. So there's now about 15 local governments here that have the 100% residential requirement, and it makes up the vast majority of building permits in the province. And industry engagement and education, of course. The performance standard, which I mentioned, based on the average driving distances locally. So we're making sure people get the charging they need overnight. And then some guidance for management and maintenance of those stations with the strata. You can check that out on our website. And I think these slides may be shared later, so the link is there. So with our newly constructed buildings ready for new transportation future, we're now turning our minds more to retrofits, and where there isn't, unfortunately, a kind of regulatory tool that we can use to require them. But nevertheless, we are really encouraging and trying to support the same type of upfront planning for 100% of stalls in residential scenarios, or at least all units having access to this charging infrastructure. The risks of not doing this and of just doing a few stalls at a time, which is how it has typically been done to date, is that the available electrical capacity in the building will be used up by the early adopters and the ones who can afford to buy EVs now, which either will lead to equity issues or alternatively lead to multiple electrical renovations, expensive renovations in the future over time. And from previous programs where the one-off chargers have been installed, it's been about $7,000 per installed EV charger. So not insignificant, and a barrier if we're thinking about having 100% adoption in the coming decades. So this, I'm not going to go over everything in this slide, but it just compares these two kind of approaches: the comprehensive EV ready retrofit versus adding a few stations at a time. It says there's a greater upfront cost when you're doing the comprehensive retrofit, but generally it leads to an outcome that's much more cost effective overall in the long run, and also more convenient for drivers, allowing them to charge in their own stalls and enabling them to install the charger with really little hassle as soon as they have purchased their EV. So thankfully, the province has shared in this vision and just fairly recently launched a new incentive program geared towards these building types, where it is funding the EV Ready plan and then the EV Ready infrastructure, as well as some money for chargers. And there's some EV advisor services to support the very complex process that Stratas are going through. So we're really gearing up to heavily promote that program and working with various partners to improve upon and expand the resources that are there for strata owners. We'd like to sweeten the pot a little further as well and add top-ups to that program. So that's to be confirmed, but we're really hopeful about this approach being embraced, and there's definitely challenges as well, but is a direction we'd like to see municipalities go. So I'll leave it at that, and yeah, happy to answer questions and dive into the discussion.
Yeah, thanks so much, Maggie. Really, really great to hear about some of the work that you're doing out there in Saanich. And I'd say it's almost due for a trip out west for me to enjoy some of those things. So thanks so much. Really appreciate that. Want to invite all the panelists to come on camera now, just to give everybody a bit of a lay of the land as to what we're up to for the last bit of the presentation. We're going to do a bit of a roundtable discussion, at which point I'm going to loft out a question to the panelists. Panelists, if you can answer within about 30 seconds, and then we can kind of move on to the next panelists to answer. And then we've got a bit of time for audience questions. Those have been coming fast and furious. Thanks everybody for those questions. So we've got a few that we're going to answer live. So let's roll over to the roundtable discussion. So I know we've been talking about legislative obstacles impeding EV development. So what do we think about the charging infrastructure in Ontario? And I know this may be a bit tricky for you, Maggie, because you're out west, but is there anything impeding the development of that structure on the legislative ends? Maybe Sara or Raymond might be good for you.
That's a long discussion, but there are some things that are impeding deployment. So for example, one of the issues right now is that charging providers can only charge by the amount of time you stay at a charger. They can't charge by the kilowatt hour that you use. So it makes it unfair to certain consumers who have cars that charge slower and things like that. So there's that. There's other rules that make it hard for local utilities to invest in charging infrastructure. So certainly if the government could reduce or remove obstacles that make it harder or more expensive or longer to deploy charging stations, that would certainly help.
Sara, did you want a couple of words on that?
That's a big one. That's what we ran into with the Alectra Drive at Home project. So we had to put in like a per charging hour structure, and that was fun. So yes, I think a lot more collaboration is required, and regulatory reform with utilities being able to offer EV rates, EV specific rates. We have customers calling us sometimes saying, when are you going to have an EV rate to charge like super off peak? And it's a bit of a process. So we're really excited to work collaboratively with the Ontario Energy Board, including this pilot that I explained today, to hopefully get some clarity there and a path forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sara. I'm glad that you mentioned utilities. I'm wondering what the panelists think is the most important role of the large public utilities, such as the Hydro Ottawas, the Hydro Ones, in supporting the update of EVs, the uptake of EVs. Some thoughts around utilities? Maybe we'll go to Maggie first on that one.
Sure, yeah, and I think Sara alluded to it. I think one of the most important is the rate structure, and here in BC Hydro is now looking at that. But right now it's structured to encourage efficiency, and so it actually steps up when you use a certain amount, and that's a complete disincentive to electrification and EVs. So rate structure, also I think deployment, particularly around DC fast chargers and kind of the more expensive technologies. And then a lot of the programmatic pieces like rebates and incentives to support the early market adoption.
Yeah, no, that's some great points. We had another one here. What is the number one action that the City of Ottawa could take to support the different sectors in accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles? Raymond maybe wants to jump in on this one.
Well, I more or less covered it in the presentation, right? So the biggest action is to find ways to rapidly deploy many more public chargers so that those who don't have options at home are able to enjoy the benefits of having an electric car.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to get those charging stations out there, and then people sort of see it and start thinking about it a bit more. So I want to hear from all the panelists on this last one. What do we think do we think the Canadian citizens are willing to switch to EVs, and why or why not? Why don't we start with Sara on that one?
I think so. I mean, look at the research, the evidence of the growth trends. I think there's huge interest. I can confidently say, I think if you're not already driving an EV in this virtual room that we're in today, you're probably thinking of your next vehicle being an electric. So I think it's on our minds, and there's just some misconceptions, some public education and awareness that needs to still help Canadian consumers make that switch.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we were over at the Meet the Mobile Education trailer that EnviroCentre and Electric Vehicle Council sponsored here in Ottawa, and just getting people behind the wheel was a really important thing. Maggie, did you have any thoughts on getting Canadians switched over to EVs?
Yeah, I think the interest and the desire is there. I mean, I think it's really a matter of removing the barriers. If people aren't buying an EV, it's for a good reason, like they don't have charging at home, or they don't think that they can get where they need to go on their cross-country road trips. And there's been a lot of progress, and the polls and things like that are out there are showing that people are wanting to choose EV for their next vehicle. So it's a matter of making it possible.
Yeah, getting those people into the EVs and seeing what it's like. I know I did my first test drive a few months ago at that education trailer, and it was a blast. I mean, what an eye opener to get behind an EV and just feel that. Raymond, did you have some thoughts on that before we move over to attendee questions?
Yeah, so I think Jeff sort of summarized it. It's a question of education, right? And what I tell people is EVs are better in every possible way, with the one exception being that if you're doing a long trip, you'll have to wait a bit longer to charge. But in every other way, they're better, right? And there was a comment from someone here about, what's the purpose of an EV? Well, and there's been other questions of the same flavor, right? So just to be clear, I don't think anybody's advocating that you should, if you're biking to work or walking to work or taking the bus, that you should go and buy an EV instead. Not at all, right? What I'm saying is we have a lot of people generating lots of greenhouse gases using either gas or diesel vehicles. Well, if we replace those without people having to affect their lifestyle, and it's a better experience with an electric vehicle than the gas vehicle, because you don't have to fuel it in the middle of winter when it's -20 or it's raining or whatever, right? You plug it in the garage, it's ready the next morning. So it's a much better experience. And you're not sacrificing anything, and you're doing something that's better for the environment, right? So yes, if those people want to take the bus and want to bike and want to walk and all that, absolutely, right? But I've seen programs in Ottawa trying to get people to do that for the many years that I've been on this earth. When I was a teenager, they were trying to encourage us to do that, but yet I don't see mass adoption of that. I see some people doing it, absolutely, and I applaud that. But what I'm thinking is we have a climate crisis. How do we reduce GHGs as fast as possible? One of the best ways is to replace those gas guzzling and GHG spewing vehicles with electric vehicles. It's an easy thing to do, and it's great for the environment.
Yeah, great points there, Raymond, for sure. Sara, did you want to jump in?
I'm just going to say I'm one of those people. So I saw a question in the chat. What do the panelists drive? I don't drive. So we actually got rid of, we had 2 vehicles, both ICEs, and I'm close enough to the Great Center that I either cycle or I would take the bus. So we got rid of our second car just before the pandemic, and I'm really itching to buy an EV, but I will only buy it if I absolutely need to buy a vehicle.
Absolutely. No, that's commendable, Sarah. And I know here in Ottawa, we just started Let's Bike Month, sponsored by Enviro Center. So still getting, hoping that people get out on their bikes as much as possible. And this is just a transition for, those must-have rides. So I know there's a lot of different questions in the Q&A. Thanks, everybody, for those. And I know the panelists were able to get to a few, but we'll sort of hit on some of the more popular ones. A question for Raymond. How can people make a transition to EVs without fear? They're wondering about towing capacity. People have boats, trailers. Do EVs tow as much as or more? I know with the F-150, they're looking at potentially 1 million pounds of towage. So talk about the towing capacity of EVs.
Okay, so the F-150, the Lightning, which was just introduced last week or the week before, will have a towing capacity of 10,000 pounds. So that 1 million pound thing was a publicity stunt that they did, right? But the real towing capacity is 10,000 pounds, and it's got a range of somewhere around 400 kilometers. So for towing trailers and all that, that certainly won't be a problem. Yes, when you're towing, it does reduce your range. So in my case, so I said earlier that I have a 2013 Model S. I also have a 2020 Model Y that came with a factory installed hitch that supports up to 3,500 pounds. And I have a boat. It happens to be my newer boat. I sold my older boat, my gas boat, last year, but my new boat is an electric pontoon. So it's an electric pontoon, and I pull it no problem with my Model Y. So trailering is not an issue with EVs. If you're trailering bigger things, that could be a problem, but trailering is certainly possible with EVs.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for clearing that up. I didn't think 1 million pounds sounded right? I think it was a bit of an ad campaign, but 10,000 is quite a bit, and it's going to get most of those boats in the water for people in and around this time of year. So we had another question. Does it take longer to charge with the energy management system? Like if you had sort of 4 cars plugged in, would that be a bit longer?
Okay, so I wanted to answer that too, because one of the misconceptions that people have is that, it's that your car has to charge all night, right? So if you look at a typical consumer or a typical commuter in Canada, they commute somewhere around 30 kilometers a day, something like that. And with a level 2 charger, so a 240 volt, 30 amp or so charger that you would have in your garage, well, that would take about an hour for the car to be charged, right? So on a typical day, your charger would charge your car for maybe a couple of hours. So if you have a system where you're sharing the capacity, charging capacity between, let's say, 10 vehicles, right? And you could do 2 at a time. Well, you'd have plenty of time overnight to give 2 hours to every vehicle, right? And the vehicles, when they're finished charging, the system won't wait. They'll switch to the other vehicle right away, right? So this is not really an issue. Yes, it will take more time, but the bottom line is, from my perspective anyways, what I want is the car to be charged when I'm ready to leave for whatever I'm doing the next morning, and those systems will achieve that. Okay.
Yeah, great points. So someone else is wondering about our cold climate. It's a little bit hard to remember now that we're in the middle of June, but we do get snow. We do have ice in winter. Are we doing a good enough job of informing EV consumers of the differences between spring, summer, and fall usage versus winter? So do the other panelists want to take that? I could take that also if you wish.
We don't have a real winter here.
Yeah, that's a tea winter out there. So
that's right.
Maggie may be disqualified.
Go ahead, Raymond.
So let me take that. I've done some experiments with my older Tesla, the 2013, and it turns out that if you have a very so typically an older EV with a smaller battery, you will lose a large percentage of your capacity when it's very cold outside. Okay. However, if you have a bigger battery, and my Tesla does about, well, a bit less than 400 kilometers now. I did an experiment at -18, going from Ottawa to Niagara Falls. And this, I was measuring on purpose because I wanted to have real numbers that I could use to talk to people about. I actually lost about 10 to 20% of my range at -18. Okay. What affects range more is speed. So how fast you're driving affects it a lot more. And the longer your trip is, the less percentage you lose, because then the car stays warm, the battery is warm, everything is already warm, right? If you're doing a small trip, let's say it's -18 and you're doing a 10-kilometer trip, then you're staying there shopping for 4 hours or something, and the car gets cold, and then you get into it and you drive back. Well, for that 40-kilometer, 20-kilometer one way, 20 kilometer the other way, you'll probably lose about 50% of your range. So it'll look like you've used up about 80 kilometers of range. Okay, but keep in mind that you're doing short trips in that case, right? So you don't need 400 kilometers of range or something if you're doing short trips. Okay, so it's true that you do lose some range in the winter. There are tricks, by the way, to try to reduce that. So you could preheat the car with the plug and all sorts of different things you could do. But it's not the issue that a lot of people make it out to be. It's really not that big of a problem.
Great. I know we still have a few open questions there. There was one that got answered that had the upvoted, so I wanted to just highlight that one. Steve Winkleman's wondering, is the global supply of rare earth metals such as cobalt and lithium sufficient to meet such projected demands for EVs? And the second part is, how much can Canada supply domestically? Maggie or Sarah, did you want to jump in on that?
I think Raymond had a, maybe Sarah wants to speak to it. Raymond, I think, was more knowledgeable than I was around kind of where that trajectory is going. Sure, over to you, Raymond.
Okay, so first of all, cobalt and lithium are not rare. Lithium is in the rare earths part of the periodic table because of where it is in the periodic table. It's actually the 21st, I think, most abundant element in the crust. So, and Mitchell actually answered part of the question there. So, cobalt is a problem. Not because it's rare as such, it's because it's being mined in unethical conditions in some artisan mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay, now one of the things that people don't realize with cobalt is that cobalt is actually used in the petroleum industry to remove sulfur from petroleum. So there's more cobalt used in the oil industry than there is in the EV battery industry, okay? So, and there's some manufacturers like Tesla, they've reduced the cobalt already by 90% in their batteries, and they intend to go to cobalt-free chemistries in sometime in the next year or so. So they're eliminating cobalt. They're doing it for, you know, to avoid this political problem of child labor and all that. But the other reason they're doing it is because cobalt is very expensive. So they're trying to reduce the cost of the batteries. Eliminating cobalt reduces the cost of the battery, gets rid of that ethical problem at the same time. Okay. So for other parts of a car, so if you recall with an internal combustion engine, you also have things like a starter, you have an alternator, you have a catalytic converter, and all those things contain not necessarily technically rare earths, but elements that are rarer, like platinum and things of that nature. So, so you know, it's not a problem that's unique to electric vehicles. That being said, it's possible to make an electric motor that has no rare earths in it. That would be an induction electric motor. The reason that magnetic or permanent magnet motors are used is because they're more efficient in certain conditions. Okay, and actually a Tesla, to be a bit more detailed, a Tesla has, one of the motors is induction, so it has no rare earths in it, and the other one is permanent magnet, so it has rare earths in it. Okay.
That's great. So we had another question. Thanks, Raymond. Appreciate that. So we had a question from Maggie. People are just wondering about the benefits of e-bikes, something that you may be passionate about.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it was alluded to in some of the comments just around the embodied emissions and other environmental impacts, things like mining, that are still present within electric vehicles. And so, you know, when you're thinking about the whole life cycle of a transportation mode, certainly active transportation and e-bikes are a much lower impact. So there's that benefit. When we modeled out our carbon emission pathway, we found that active transportation was going to get us about 5% of the way, and EVs were about 19%. But we didn't at the time take into account the substantial impact that e-bikes can have. And we're finding that they're actually displacing more car trips here than other modes because they can go up hills, you can get there without being sweaty. The average trip is about twice as long as for a regular bicycle. There's tons of family bikes and cargo bikes that are out there now. And, you know, I think one of the biggest indicators of how far you drive and where you drive is whether you own that vehicle. So if people are able to drop their second vehicle and have an e-bike, or even go car free and have an e-bike, then it kind of locks in those emission reductions. I mean, that's relative, of course, to an ICE vehicle, but there's other community benefits around reduced congestion, you know, health benefits, all of those pieces, happiness and well-being, mental health. So there's lots of good things. We have to do it all. It's not an either or. So
absolutely, and you'll be passing me on my regular bike as I get a lot of those electric bikes. I try to keep up for a couple of paces, but it's a bit hard. So we've been chatting a little bit about, we've been hearing some questions about the grid, and I'm curious to know some of the panelists' opinion. You know, where are we going to get this extra electricity from, and can the grid support this transition? Is there a bit of a worry there?
Yeah, so I could take that one. I don't think it's a matter of getting extra electricity. It's a matter of being efficient with what we have. So, for instance, you know, as we have more EVs plugged into the grid, right now what utilities are trying to understand is what happens if that is left unmanaged, right? So all of a sudden we have maybe, you know, 10, 15 people getting an EV in one neighborhood. Can that local transformer sustain that? And the problem is utilities actually don't have visibility. We don't know when our customers are, you know, buying an EV, buying a charging station. So it creates a little bit of an issue for our distribution planning. But some of the ways that we can, you know, address that, and that's what we're doing through our pilot projects, through managed avoided cost analyses that we're currently working on, is how can these different, you know, load management approaches kind of help us with that. So through price incentives, you know, developing an EV rate, getting users to shift their charging to overnight, that will help us with the demand. Direct load control. So when there's a peak event, can the utility directly control your charger? And you'll of course have the option to opt out of that event, but can we have that relationship with customers where we're pulling on their EVs assets as we need in order to alleviate strain on the grid? So we're looking at all sorts of kind of managed EV charging and load management approaches, but there isn't a clear answer for that. And it gets a little complicated when you're trying to do an analysis on this. You know, what is the impact at a provincial scale? You can't do it. You really have to focus at the neighborhood level. How old is the distribution infrastructure in that area? How many EV drivers? Like, what is the projection? A lot of pieces that have to come together to really answer, you know, what is the impact on the grid?
Yeah, great answer, Sarah. Thanks for outlining that for us. So I want to leave a bit of time for some final thoughts from the panelists. I know we're getting closer to 8:30. We may spill a little bit over. Raymond, there were a few questions that you wanted to answer live. Was there one or two that you wanted to touch on?
Well,
I actually, that were piling up there.
Actually, it's the one I really wanted to touch on is the one that that Sara sort of just covered there. So the president of OPG at a conference a couple of years ago told us that about 5% of the province's capacity is being wasted overnight because water is flowing over dams where we can't store the water, right? So there's excess capacity available at night that would need to be soaked up before it would actually cost us any more money to make this extra electricity, right? There's also some situations with windmills. So Ontario has a lot of wind energy. Okay, and sometimes if you look at gridwatch.ca, you'll see that sometimes we have up to 20% of our production comes from wind on very windy days. So on windy days when the demand is not very high, those windmills the electricity from those windmills has to be curtailed. So there's some extra capacity there that gets wasted that we could soak up with car batteries before we need to do anything about adding capacity to the grid. Right. And as I think Sara's mentioned before, most charging happens at night, and that's where we have the least amount of demand, right? And the most surplus electricity. So there certainly is capacity to cover a good portion of the fleet. And so we don't anticipate that being a problem for some time.
So it is a matter of cracking the nut with long duration storage, right, Raymond? So, we have the intermittent resources, but how do we actually harness that energy and keep it for long enough when we actually need to use it? There's a lot of progress there, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much. So want to kind of go around. Why don't we start with Maggie with some final words? Maggie, over to you for some final thoughts on what you've been doing there that's been working and what we can kind of model around the rest of Canada.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the direction that Ottawa is heading, creating that shared vision and really inviting people in to help create what that shared vision is, and then to demonstrate the leadership in the areas that you do have the direct kind of control and influence towards getting there, I think is the way to go. And there's a lot of interested parties in this work, so it's a great field for collaboration for sure.
Absolutely. And there was just we can get you one more question in chat there. Someone's just wondering, did you in Saanich change the Planning Act to alter the historic character of neighborhoods? Some people in Ottawa can't build a driveway in an older neighborhood as it's against the local character, therefore no EV charging stations. So just on your way out, if you want to give us some words on that.
No, and that's a good question. We in single family neighborhoods, it's not typically a problem. There are driveways within Saanich, but certainly our neighbor to the south in City of Victoria, where it's a more historic character, will be grappling with that. I'm not sure what the solutions are just yet. And City of Vancouver has actually also done some pilots and are kind of moving in a direction that maybe I can send a link to that.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe we'll have to have another EcoHack session on that one in particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, Maggie, I know you have to jump off, but wanted to really thank you so much for being a part of this and really great work you're doing out there out west, and nice to see all that progress being made. Sara, wanted to throw. Thanks so much. Sara, wanted to throw it over to you for some final thoughts on where you see the directions going. What would you like to have people sort of think about and focus on as far as the transition to EVs?
I'm going to say it again, collaboration. There's a notion here, in the States especially, they're really figuring some things out down there, but they say in order to make this work, it's not going to be a competitive process. It's going to be a collaborative process. And that is something that we definitely adopt at Alectra. And we really appreciate the opportunity to work with government stakeholders, with innovators, with customers, with all levels of EV adoption advocacy groups. That's how we're going to get there. And that's definitely our secret sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something we're doing in Ottawa when we're working with the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. Here at SmartNetAlliance, we do a showcase as well. And, we make sure that the EVs are always a big part of that because people like to touch and feel and get behind them. And, so no, totally, it's all about collaborating. So thank you so much again for Sara for joining us. Want to head over to Raymond for some final thoughts from you. What are your thoughts as far as we push forward? I know you've been in the game for a good few years. You're probably starting to see a lot more progress than we had a couple of years ago, especially around electric buses and charging stations. So, what are some thoughts as to what are the next few pieces that we need, and some thoughts on how far we've come?
We've come a long way. I wish it would have happened a bit faster, but we are where we are. From my perspective, the International Energy Agency said it well, that by 2035 we need to be at 100% new vehicles that are electric, and they confirmed from their analysis that, and this answers one of the questions that was out there actually, that it's possible to produce that many cars with electric technology. So the question for us is, how fast do we here in Ottawa and in Canada, how fast do we get there? And what I would like to see is us getting there as fast as possible, because it's better for the environment. And like I said before, EVs are better vehicles from every perspective, except charging on long trips, which doesn't happen very often, and is not that painful, especially when you look at the cost of electricity, which is much lower than the cost of gas. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to increase numbers substantially in the next couple of years.
Absolutely, and we'll just keep working on getting more and more people in behind the wheel of EVs. Mitchell, did you want to come in for some final words on what we can expect from the City of Ottawa? I know we're looking at potentially an EV-only zone by 2028, which could be a bit of a game changer. What can we expect the city to be doing to help spread the adoption of electric vehicles?
Yeah, so we're just in the early stages right now of developing what our EV strategy looks like. And so the EcoHack-a-City initiative that we've kind of participated in today and going forward with the sessions we've got going with the training, that'll be kind of a starting off point for that engagement at the local level to figure out what it is that we should focus on. And then as that strategy unfolds, the expectation is that we're learning from other municipalities and other jurisdictions that have had success deploying and adopting electric vehicles, and building in kind of the best practices from those municipalities into the action plans that we put into our EV strategy. So that's kind of the initial phase that we're looking at. And also, as that goes forward, I'd imagine it includes deploying more electric charging stations, bringing forward educational campaigns that kind of inform people about what it is that you can do to, like, what's needed to transition to electric vehicles, addressing those misconceptions or outstanding challenges that people present to us. And then working with that and the stakeholders that we have at the local level to move forward on that. So that's kind of the expectation going forward. And it's really great to have everybody involved today to kind of jumpstart that conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great to see the interest, the level of engagement that people have around electric vehicles. There's certainly a lot of curiosity. I think the people who have already adopted the electric vehicles are, really great first movers, because they're able to sort of promote the driving of them, and it's so much fun, and it's so different, and it saves you so much money, and it saves the environment. So it's just ticking so many boxes, which is great. I want to thank everybody again. I want to thank the whole team at Earth Day as well. Big thanks to Kristen and April and Catherine for all your work you're doing. Do take a look at the rest of the series. There's 3 more across Canada in the next few months that you can participate in. Here at SmartNetAlliance, we'll continue with our virtual green drinks. We've got one next week on next Thursday, and we'll focus on solar energy. So that's a good piece to go along with the electric vehicles. I'll just add a link in chat there so everybody can sign up for that. I know, stay tuned. We will have a recording of this to go out to people as well, and we'll try to capture some of the chat and the Q&A. And once again, just want to thank everybody for their hard work. And it's very exciting to see us transition to new reality, and that is what electric vehicles are all about. So, you know, hopefully everyone can get down and get into a test drive, especially when the mobile education trailer's back, and, you know, they can attend an electric vehicle council meeting and, you know, keep supporting that transition. Once again, this is Nick at SMARTNetAlliance, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone.